Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today is the start of the 2024 NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. I can't believe we're already here at the Finals. I mean, these years are just fucking flying by. But we're going to get into my entire breakdown here in my official prediction for the Finals. And I do plan on doing a review of every single NBA Finals game. So you can stay tuned for that after each game. I do plan on doing reviews. But in terms of this breakdown, the way I want to start it is kind of look at how I viewed these teams going into the year and take a look at their path to the NBA Finals. So we can start off with the Dallas Mavericks. And if you go back all the way to my prediction video before the year started, I was actually pretty low on the Mavericks. And it wasn't about Luka or Kyrie. It was about really the rest of the roster. I felt it was kind of depleted. I didn't really trust a lot of their role players. I still wasn't sold on Jason Kidd as a head coach because he was really brought in there to clean up their defense, and I felt like he did do that. However, in the Kyrie trade, you gave up probably one of your, and this might sound funny now, but in the conference final run, Dorian Finney-Smith was a crucial piece to that run, and I felt like that really kind of hurt their defense, getting rid of him. They lost some other guys that were really good defenders on that team. So I was like, I don't know if Jason Kidd really fits the identity of this Dallas Mavericks team anymore. But the key part of this, it's actually two things. We all know about Luka. We all know about Kyrie. We know how great they are. But number one, their rookie, Derek Lively, which they got with the 10th overall pick. They're probably never going to pick that high again as long as Luka is in Dallas. They just kind of had an off year, and they were able to land Derek Lively, who was a flat-out stud for them in the regular season, but most notably the playoffs. Derek Lively was incredible, so he was a great get for them. And then their trade deadline moves, bringing in Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington, who have been incredible role players, particularly P.J. Washington, who's stepped up and even in some spots been the third scoring option, providing just incredible versatility on both sides of the ball. So those moves there really changed the Mavericks, I think, from what they were at the start of the year. Getting that rookie who came in and had such a great impact, and then those two high-end role players in Washington and Gafford you brought in at the trade deadline. So I will say this about the Mavericks, and we're going to get into this more when I talk about their paths, but they definitely had the harder path in the playoffs. So let's take a look at the Boston side of things. And I don't remember, I'm pretty sure the Bucks were actually the title favorite going into this year after the Damian Lillard trade. Obviously, that didn't work out for them. As for Boston, it's no surprise they're in the finals. With Dallas, it actually does surprise me just looking back. If you would have told me before the year started that Dallas ended up in the finals, I would have been shocked. If you would have told me Boston was in the finals, I would not be surprised whatsoever. And this is a point that I've said a couple times throughout this season is I feel like this current rendition of the Boston Celtics at full health is the best starting five since the Kevin Durant Warriors. I don't even really think that that's much of a debate. When you look at the versatility, the fact that these are all guys that have made all-star teams in recent memory, Drew Holiday and Derek White, you can argue, are the two best perimeter defenders in the NBA. They have both of them in their backcourt. Then Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown is an all-star / all-NBA caliber player. Jason Tatum is a borderline MVP level player, and then Kristaps Porzingis probably just had his best year of his career, providing the versatility on both sides of the ball, and just really changed the Celtics defense with just his height and his rim protection. So yeah, I don't think that's a hyperbolic take to say that this is the best starting five since the KD Warriors, because these are all basically all-star level players. They all played basically at that level throughout this season. They were by far the best team in the regular season, winning 64 games. And this is where we can kind of get into a comparison of their paths to the finals. Like I said earlier, the Mavericks 100% had a tougher path to the finals. Their road to the finals was so much more difficult. I even think that the team they played in the first round, the Los Angeles Clippers, was a more difficult team than any team that the Boston Celtics played. And a lot of the teams that the Celtics played were dealing with injuries. You look at the first round against the Heat. Jimmy Butler was out for that entire round. And although I don't think Jimmy playing would have changed the outcome, I think it would have been a much more competitive series. Then you look at the Cavs, I don't even think they had a shot. But Donovan Mitchell got hurt in the later part of that round. Obviously, they have zero chance. They actually have a -20 chance of winning that series when Donovan gets hurt. And then They play the Pacers, and I made a short about this. I think the Indiana Pacers are the worst team to make a conference final. Definitely since I've been watching basketball. I'm not I don't claim to be like a historian of the NBA. Like, I know the great players, but I can't tell you what year every team that made the conference final, so I can't like confidently say the Pacers are the worst conference final team ever. I'm sure there were worse ones, but I've been watching basketball for like 8-9 years now, and this is by far, that Pacers team was by far and away the worst team to ever make the conference final. I think like the second close would be the 2021 Atlanta Hawks, but at least that team actually got 2 games off the eventual champion Bucks team. So that Pacers team, I had some guys saying in my comments like, oh, they were competitive games. Dude, they got swept. They got swept. That, like, I get it, they're competitive, but at the end of the day, they got swept in the conference finals. They did not belong there. And for me, that conference finals matchup kind of felt like a first-round matchup. I mean, we all knew Boston was winning that. So now we get to the actual NBA finals for the Boston Celtics, where they're the favorite. We take a look at the Mavericks side of things, where, like I said, 100% had a tougher path. I think the Clippers, their first-round matchup, tougher opponent than anyone Boston played. The Clippers, they dealt with their issues, obviously, with Kawhi, but James Harden was actually pretty good in the playoffs, especially for his standards. When you look at James Harden throughout, his time with Brooklyn and Philly, he was just dreadfully bad in the playoffs, but he was actually decent with the Clippers. I think he had like 26 points per game on good shooting efficiency, and Paul George was playing really well, and all around, the Clippers are a well-rounded team, and I like Ty Lue. The second round, they played the Oklahoma City Thunder, the 1 seed in the Western Conference, which, in my opinion, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was the NBA MVP. I know they gave it to Jokic, but I think SGA should have been the MVP, and I made a couple videos about that throughout the regular season because he was the most consistent scorer in the NBA and led the youngest team in this year's playoffs to the 1 seed in a bloated Western Conference. For me, SGA was kind of easily the MVP in my eyes. I still, obviously Jokic had a great year, but SGA had the stats, he had the narrative, he had the playoff success in terms of he was the 1 seed. I mean, the winning success. So I don't really get why SGA didn't win this MVP. So in my opinion, the Mavs beat the guy who should have won MVP, and then the conference final, you beat one of the best defensive teams of the past couple of years in the Minnesota Timberwolves with an emerging superstar of Anthony Edwards. These are all teams, like the Thunder and the Timberwolves, I think are 2 teams that could have given the Celtics a run for their money, and Dallas beat both those teams. So now we have set the NBA Finals. The quick argument for both sides. The Dallas Mavericks, they have the best player in this series, and anytime you have the best player, you got a shot to win this. Although I think Boston has the better all-around roster, when you have the best guy in the series, that can sometimes outweigh the other team's talent. We've seen that in plenty of finals. I could pick a couple different examples. You look at the 2021 NBA Finals, the Bucks versus the Suns. The Suns were probably the better all-around team, but Giannis was just the best player in this series and just went fucking insane on both sides of the ball and just took over. When you have that guy, a legit top 3 player in the world type guy, he can just take over any given series. And on top of that, Kyrie Irving can take over any given game. If you look up and Kyrie has 50 points, not really that big of a surprise. He's one of the most prolific scorers. I don't think it's talked about enough about his finishing. Everyone talks about his handles and his shooting and all that, and his his nifty playmaking and all that, but his finishing, he's legitimately one of the best finishers in the history of basketball. People don't really talk about that. I heard LeBron kind of touch on that on his podcast, but we need to start talking about Kyrie Irving as an all-time finisher at the rim because it's just kind of unfair. His ability to finish with both hands, just a fearless scorer, one of the most clutch players. So you put that with Luka, they're one of the most lethal, deadly backcourts in the history of the NBA, and that'll officially be recognized if they win this title. And on top of that, we already touched on some of their role players with P.J. Washington, with Daniel Gafford, with Derek Lively, and Derek Jones. That's really their rotation right there, and Tim Hardaway, I guess, as well. But I think it's a really good supporting cast for your 2 stars there. You got the best player. That's kind of the argument for the Mavs is, hey, we got the best player. We got him a legit running mate with Kyrie Irving who can be just as good as him on any given night. And we got a great surrounding cast. That's kind of the argument for the Mavericks. The argument for the Celtics is we've been the most dominant team this entire year. We only lost 2 games in our playoff. And like, yeah, I get it. I knocked them a little bit for having weak competition. But at the end of the day, they can only play who's out on the court against them. And they handle their business. They fucking bludgeoned the Eastern Conference playoffs. You got to give them credit for that. They didn't play down to their competition. They handled their business and smoked everyone in the Eastern Conference, only losing 2 games. They won 64 games in the regular season. They're an absolute juggernaut. They have an incredible starting 5. And for me, it comes down to this. This is my final prediction for the NBA Finals. I want to say up front, I'm going to be rooting for the Dallas Mavericks in this series. And I feel like the majority of NBA fans are rooting for the Mavericks in this series. But my gut tells me this is Boston's year. You know, they got to the finals a couple years ago. They've been a perennial team in the Eastern Conference Finals, but never been able to get it done. This feels like the year that they are able to get it done. Milwaukee's kind of out of the way. The East was kind of wide open, the West was wide open in terms of who was going to win it. And just from a pure talent perspective, a player-per-player perspective, the Boston Celtics have a better roster than Dallas. It really comes down to that. And if Jason Tatum can finally get over the hump of, you know, we've always talked about this with Tatum, is incredible in spurts, but in terms of like a full playoff series, he can disappear. And that he took a lot of flack for that during the 2022 finals against the Warriors, where there were spots where he just disappeared and he was taking terrible shots. It all comes down to Jason Tatum for the Boston Celtics. I know that's not breaking news, but if that guy disappears, the Celtics are screwed. They need Jason Tatum to cement himself as that true number 1 superstar level player. And I think he's more than capable of doing it. I think he's at a point now, he's in his physical prime. He's in his prime in terms of his skill set. He's one of the most well-rounded players we have in the NBA. You could argue he's the most versatile Swiss Army knife in today's NBA. I really view him at that level. And that is why I'm picking the Boston Celtics, even though it pains me to say, because I'm rooting for Dallas. I do think the Boston Celtics are going to win this series just because they have the better overall roster. They have more guys that you can rely on from a scoring ability. Like the Mavs, they got 2 incredible ones, but the Celtics have like 5 guys where if you look up and they had like 30 points, wouldn't really be that surprising. I mean, Derek White, yeah, kind of, but he's been on a massive heater in the playoffs as well. So it comes down to that. I have the Celtics winning this in 7 games. I'm going to be rooting passionately for the Mavericks, but that is my official prediction. Celtics in 7. So make sure you let me know down in the comments what you thought of this whole ramble here. But definitely let me know your predictions. I want to know. I'm going to be putting out a poll here on the channel of what you guys think, but definitely know down in the comments who do you have winning the NBA Finals and in how many games. If you made it this far in the video, really appreciate you listening to me. Please like and subscribe.